You know him, you love him, and you always agree with him. Our friend from the Colorado Springs Gazette, Wayne Laugesen. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Hey, I wanted to talk to you about a few things. First, as we were talking with David Flaherty, let's talk a little bit about roads. And there's a proposal going on, and some Republicans have decided to switch over and pimp for a tax increase for not roads. I want to make that really clear. It's for transportation, which is a slush fund for cities, 30% going to transit, which we don't know what that means, and then the rest going to roads. If that doesn't get through the legislature, the Colorado contractors and some other folks are going to put something on the ballot anyway. None of this looks encouraging.
Well, I think it's a stretch to think that voters are going to go and approve a big roads tax statewide. State government's budget has increased by 40% in the last 5 years. The Department of Transportation has just spent $150 million building new offices for state bureaucrats to work in, and they have no money for roads whatsoever unless we raise a tax.
The graph that Linda Gorman, our chief economist, did was spectacular. You see the budget over the last 10 years skyrocketing and transportation funding flatlining.
Right.
And so we've got money for things like the Medicaid expansion,
right,
which if they ever voted on or put to a public vote would have lost. They would never fund that. So this is really the Washington Monument gamut, which is we're gonna not spend money on roads so we can spend money on things that we know that people would vote down to put us into this box.
Exactly, and all this Medicaid expansion serves about 20% at best of the state's population. So we're putting all of this money into something that, like you said, wouldn't pass if it were put to a ballot. And
well, at least it would be the intellectually honest thing to do, to say if we're going to put ourselves on this course of Medicaid expansion, put 1 out of every 5, 1 out of every 4 Coloradans on welfare, shouldn't we vote on this?
Right, and we didn't. So it's exactly what you said. It's Washington Monument strategy. We see cities and towns do it, and now we see the state do it. We're starving. We have no money. You have to dodge the potholes, the cratered roads. Unless you give us more money, that's just the way it's going to be. Except they can spend, like I say, $150 million on new office buildings. The very department that's supposed to fix and build roads. Now, I-25 between Castle Rock and Denver is a nightmare, as anyone knows who drives that. And a lot of people from Metro Denver drive that over the weekend as they go to the Pikes Peak region for entertainment and to get away into the Pueblo Reservoir and whatnot. So all weekend long, that thing's clogged up like it's rush hour during a weekday, both directions. And the state widened a similar portion of that from Woodman Road in Colorado Springs to Baptist Road in Monument a couple years ago for less than $100,000. So I don't know what that 17-mile stretch would cost that is a pressing need. But $150 million on office buildings, that money would have gone a long way to finishing another lane in both directions on that stretch of road. It could have even finished it.
What's so insulting is that they put us on this course for Medicaid expansion. It's unsustainable. A few years ago, they tried to raise our taxes. Amendment 66, which the Independence Institute led the campaign against, was defeated 2-1.
Right.
So they held our kids for ransom. That didn't work. So now they're going to hold our roads for ransom.
Right. And I think they're going to have a hard time getting it passed. For one thing, the mayor of Colorado Springs, the second largest city in Colorado, and not by much, it's almost the size of Denver.
Denver, right.
Yeah, right. So John Suthers, former Attorney General, he's come out in opposition to a state roads tax. And the reason that he's done that, I believe, is that Colorado Springs passed a local tax to fix roads and to, repair potholes and whatnot. And you pass a state roads tax, the one that's being proposed in the legislature, and you're going to push the sales tax in Colorado Springs upwards of almost 10 cents on the dollar. You're going to be like San Francisco. There'll only be 4 or 5 cities, large cities in the United States, that have a higher sales tax than Colorado Springs if one of these state roads taxes should pass.
Yeah, and there's only so much room to raise sales tax or any tax, but that doesn't stop them. Let me switch gears a little bit. You did an interesting editorial about the science of climate and climate change. And I love the way you started it, which was we're going to rely on science.
Right.
Except the problem is the science didn't happen the way a couple legislators wanted it to happen. What's the story?
These science deniers are a problem. I mean, these are people, we have people in the legislature, 17 legislators, senators and representatives, who are flat out denying science. This is established science, and what it is a study by the Colorado Department of Health and Environment. This is Governor John Hickenlooper's environmental agency, bureaucracy. Governor John Hickenlooper is very worried about climate change. He wants to impose a clean power plan statewide, similar to what the Supreme Court told the Obama administration they could not impose. They put it on hold. So we have a governor and one of his bureaucracies who are very concerned about climate change. Therefore, they did a study trying to find out whether fracking wells were polluting the air. And if you live within or work within 500 yards, I believe it was, of a fracking well, are you in danger? Do you have more chance of getting cancer because of what's in the air? They did 10,000 samples.
Who's they, by the way?
The Colorado Department of Health and Environment.
This is not some oil and gas company.
No. This is CDPHE. This is the state's environmental agency. They analyzed 10,000. Now, we're not talking 100, 150, 10,000 air samples, air quality samples from around these wells. And they were all below the threshold set by the EPA for clean air.
Each and every one.
Each and every one.
Each and every one.
Well, that is my understanding, is that
10,
each and every one. 10,000 of, they had 10,000 opportunities to find a big problem, and they didn't find a problem. So this is the established science, and it's very well-grounded science. And so we have 17 legislators who do not like what they heard in that report. Came out in February.
You have climate activists like Matt Jones in the legislature said, I don't care what that says. We change the results. They sign a letter to the governor saying this is wrong.
Matt Jones and his people ought to be celebrating. They ought to be happy. They're so worried about what fracking is doing to the air, particularly in the immediate area of a fracking well. They ought to be dancing in the aisles right now because they were wrong, because the air is clean, and they were supposedly worried about the air. So they should be happy. They're not happy. What they wanted was a result that would help Matt Jones do what Matt Jones really wants to do, which is shut down fracking in Colorado. So they needed dirty air. They didn't get dirty air. They got clean air. And so they are protesting the science. And the science is irrefutable.
Is this a bad analogy, which was something like, I'm worried I've got cancer. God, I don't want to have cancer. Give me all the cancer tests you have. Test for every possible thing. Do the genetics, do the whole thing. I come back and they say, no, you don't have cancer. Drinking your Diet Coke didn't give you cancer. You're cancer-free. And I'd be depressed as hell about that. This is news worth celebrating. The air around these wells is clean.
If you are upset when that diagnosis comes back, it's because you had a lawsuit against Diet Coke, perhaps, or some other vested interest where you were actually going to benefit from the bad news from the doctor. And that's the case here. They want a bad report that will help them achieve an end goal, which is shutting down fracking, and which of course would hurt all of us. It would hurt our economy, and it would raise the cost of oil and gas, and it would just be a very bad thing.
Going on that analogy, though, that if my goal was to sue Diet Coke because I drank Diet Coke and I didn't get this, there's still some personal relief that, wait a second, there's no harm. Yeah, you won't have the payday, but there's no harm. This is good stuff.
You're going to be happy, right? You don't have cancer, right? That's why I don't understand. I don't understand why these legislators who are ostensibly so concerned about our air, and thank God for them because we want clean air, why they're not happy. They should be happy.
Because there'll be more anti-fracking measures to come. Let's talk about moving on a little bit from there. There's going to be a reaction to Donald Trump and stuff that's going on, the EPA and deregulating this. I think we're getting a taste of it, a taste of that anger. Did you guys down in the Springs get a taste of that anger at your last election?
Yeah, very definitely. The Colorado Springs municipal election for all of the open district seats. There were no at-large elections, so these were all in districts. This was what you might call a liberal progressive takeover of the council. There are now 5 members of a 9-member council who fall into the category of liberal progressive. We're going to get a lot of a lot of push for regulations to stop global warming, a lot of social justice kind of stuff coming out of this council, just based on what these candidates who have now been elected stand for.
I just want to. We're talking about Colorado Springs here, right?
Yeah.
Focus on the family.
Yeah.
Home of Doug Bruce.
Listen,
there was a progressive sweep in the last elections for city council, which was just a couple months ago.
Yes.
And are you sure we're talking about the right city?
Colorado. A lot of people have moved into Colorado Springs. When I moved to Colorado in 1993, I think Colorado Springs was a city of around 300,000 people. Now it's a city of around 600,000 people. So in my short time in Colorado, the size of that city has doubled, and these people have come in from all over. So there has been a change in the political dynamics of Colorado Springs. But what we had here was a very low turnout. I think that right-of-center voters, and there's still a lot of those, and I still think there are a majority in Colorado Springs, were very lethargic. They had just won a presidential election. They didn't pay any attention to this, and they're pretty happy with the way the city's going. Meanwhile, it was a very low turnout, and I think the people who did turn out, I think the numbers are going to show this as they get analyzed, were people who were very upset with the last big election, which was the presidential election in the fall.
You've heard Caldara's first political axiom that there's nothing Republicans can't screw up, but it really is part of the Republican makeup that when you have a win, you go, whew, all right, now I can go back to my life, when in fact, that's when you're most vulnerable, and it happens every time.
Exactly, and that is precisely what you saw here, and I think it could really be an indication of things to come if Republicans don't decide to get their heads in the game. You said it perfectly. I mean, the minute they win, they just
relax
get on.
and go.
Yeah.
All right, well, here's to relaxing. Wayne, thank you so much. Thank you. Listen for me on KHOW Radio. Read me in the Denver Post. You know, a much better paper than. Tell a friend about the Independence Institute, and we'll see you next week.